Hello to the chicos and the chicas. Back to Chessable Masters Day 3 recap. It is an absolute must, a mandatory video about the legendary 1H4, which of course is something that I have got a very firm opinion about, which we are going to now shove to the side, and we are going to jump right into the game between Magnus Carlsen against Grandmaster Wei Yi, who, by the way, was leading the tournament before Day 3 kicked off, but by the end of it, he definitely wasn't. Whereas Magnus actually kept on steadily winning game after game, and this was the last round of the day. And Magnus was at this stage already in the lead enough so that he could actually afford a sort of a fun game for the viewers and for the spectators, and so he chucked in H4, and we very quickly transitioned into a reverse Tarash, which is what I thought with H4, that is, which is what I would have played with Black too. And I thought for a while that Wei Yi is going to try to really prove Magnus's H4 to be a touch too cheeky, but none of that happened, to my greatest surprise, because here he dropped back to E7. I anticipated Bishop A7, by the way, which still would have been theory with reverse colors, and very quickly this game fizzled into an endgame, which is a very clear message from Black that he had no intention whatsoever to punish H4 as hardcore as possible, and in fact entering an endgame of this kind, irrespective of the evaluation of the position, is a very dangerous territory against Magnus Carlsen, who is a remarkably awesome endgame player. So, and he actually showed his prowess in this department, because very soon White actually took the lead after completing development. Rook HC1 was played. The reason why this rook comes to H1 is because Black's main plan is to play A5 and eliminate all the queenside pawns. We had a bit of a chat about this whole plan with Grandmaster Danny King when we were commentating this game. And from here on out, Magnus plays a remarkably nice, fine endgame, very pristine technique. Really, you can't help but admire what he's doing here for a long time. Perfect moves all the way. Rook D1 is threatening to play Bishop takes H7, tickling a little bit the knight on D7. Now Bishop E4 introduces a pin, another pin here. So the tension is building up. Here he takes on F6, a very cool idea. In fact, we analyzed positions with Danny where White had the two knights against Black's two bishops and yet stood clearly better. Bishop takes obviously is the worst call, because that makes the rook unguarded, and now after the double up followed by the piling up, this is all kinds of bad news for Black, who is now losing. So GF had to be played, and now Magnus pushed the pawns up, and for the first time in the game he's actually benefiting from the rather silly 1H4. Now these two pawns are gaining a bit of space on the king side, and with the help of the bishop, H7 is also a target. So now H6 was played. But what that means now is that there are two pawns at least fixed on Black. So once we trade these bishops, the Black bishop is not going to be a particularly powerful or good piece. Trading, and we arrive in this endgame, which the engine really does like. Unfortunately, however, by this stage, both players were very short on time. At least, you know, to produce a really clear and clean endgame technique. Magnus played Rook C1, perfect. Plays Rook C6, perfect. Plays King F3, perfect. And here after Bishop D8, he needed to be just a touch more accurate and immediately play Knight C5. And the idea is that after A5, we can now drop the knight back to D3, defend, attack. And if Black does the same as in the game, then after Rook A2, we can actually play Rook C5, hitting both pawns, and we are going to net at least one of them. Rook D2, King E5. It could actually lead to... Actually, hang on, King E4 here loses to F5. No, sorry, my bad. Knight takes E5 right away. Actually, that was the trick that was played in the game, so I will show you that. Because instead, Magnus went King F3 right away, King E4, and that was a bit too soon. That was a bit too soon. That was the problem here, because now we are entering the same idea, but here Wei Yi could play Rook D2, introducing the super cheeky F5 check threat, so white does not have the time now to play this. That is the difference. Whereas in the other version that I just showed you then, it was the white king was still on f3 with white to move, and so knight e5 was possible. Whereas now I can't take on e5, on e5 with the knight because this hangs, and if I move the rook back here, then f5 check wins the knight. And so Magnus had to play rook c3 to cover the knight, and that one move loss resulted in a inferior version of the same endgame. But then Wei Yi misses his chance too by playing bishop f6. Instead, bishop e7 was to be preferred, counterattacking on b4 rather than trying to keep the e5 pawn at all cost. And from here on out, something super fascinating happened. And that is that according to the engine, Magnus more or less plays a perfect endgame, plays exactly along the engine's recommendation, and lands in an endgame that up to right this moment, I'm not sure if it's winnable or not, despite the engine claiming at times +10 or +8 at least. Sheer insanity. And I'm going to get to that point very quickly because, like I said, what happened in the interim, all the lead up appears to be the best play by both colors. So what happened was, oh, by the way, that I have to stop here. Look at this cheeky rook c2 with the idea of checkmating the world champ on the middle of the board. that was really, really cool. So king d4 was forced, and then the game continued on the logical path, and we arrived in this rook ending right here. Right here, right now, by the way, the engine says +6.4. And Magnus plays out the exact moves that the engine recommends. And so from here, we very quickly actually ended up in the game in this position. Pawn up, king up, and we, the commentators, Grandmaster Danny King and myself, we thought that this game is in the pocket because we are going to simply go up here, get a queen, and the king in front of the pawn that is cut off along the g file is extremely clumsy and takes a million moves to actually get all the way down here. And in interim, the white king is going to be able to come back just on time. So we went like, yep, case closed, no worries. And the game goes along like this, and we go like, yeah, no problem. Next time king f8, then rook f7 blocks the f file, it's all over. And it turns out that actually rook f7 is a draw. Because now the rook is no longer cutting off the king, and if I go here and we promote to whatever, after takes king out, the pawn is too fast and black holds the draw. And essentially, that is what happened in the game. And we were completely flabbergasted by this fact, both Danny and I, and we actually thought that there was no win. And then I started analyzing this whole position. The engine is not really useful for a while, at least, by the way, in analyzing this. And I think that the winning idea is to start marching the king down this way, believe it or not. And it's a very strange concept, which is based on multiple tactical concepts that we can sort of weave into maneuvering the king upwards. So the ideas that I've found are based on check and bringing the king up. That's the key concept. Check and keep on coming up with the king. The idea is, one idea that we must recognize is that at any given point, if the black king drops down to h3, we have rook g5 hitting the pawn, and when the pawn moves, now we can build the bridge, which is the very common technique of winning rook endings. It's called the bridge building. When the rook separates the other rook from the pawn, and now this is a win. So that's part of the equation. The other idea is that after king f6 check here, although right now, and it's very important to stress, white doesn't have a threat. It's not so easy to move for black either, because if I promote to queen, black can check it down, right? But what do you do? Because if you move the king again, then after king d4, we are going to recreate the same situation. I'm threatening to go. In fact, now it's just all over, sorry, because I can't get behind the pawn. So that's a no-go. And if I go, let's say, on the third somewhere, then comes, I think king f4 was an idea. And if... no, it wasn't. I need to think about how this went. Wait, I found my analysis here. So, king f6, check. King e5, rook check, king... That's it, king f4. This is it. And now if the king drops down, then we have got this insane idea, once again, rook g2. And now we are threatening mate, so the pawn is immune to capture. And if it goes to h3, again, we'd use the same trickery. I think we... Oh, no, wait. No, I have to go check, sorry. And then we, again, build the bridge. I wanted to do it via g5, but of course, then e7 is capturable. So, yeah, rook g3 check, king goes wherevs, and tada, done dusted. We won again. And there was another motif that I absolutely loved, which I'm trying to recreate for you because it was so amazing. When black had an idea, something like rook down, rook down here, rook g2, check. That's it. King e3. That's it. And now if I go check, then rook e2 builds the bridge. And here, black has rook f6. Check that out. And if I get a queen, rook e6 check, queen takes e6 is stalemate. However, we don't have to take. Actually, there are multiple ways to win this, but one of them is that after the check, we just go back here. And now when they take the queen, we have mate. But what a cheeky defense. What a cheeky and in fact, I did try it in a version where the rook was up somewhere here, which meant that there was no mate threat. So after the check, actually, it legitimately drew the game, and white needed to play another move to win. But long story short, I think it's winnable. And the idea is to zigzag the king up and combine mate threats with the idea of building the bridge. So if you follow just what the engine says, king g6 is the engine's top move, rook g3 check, check, king check, and here the engine wants rook somewhere along to the side rather than keep on checking. So let's try rook b3 with the idea that if I promote to queen, then we have got the check. And now the engine says rook g6, and that is obviously with the idea of building the bridge. And if I go check, that is really, really cool, by the way. That was the last idea I wanted to show you. This endgame is so immensely rich. And it's such a foolish thing, by the way, in my opinion, if you want to improve, to just go like, oh yeah, the engine says blah. Try to understand what's going on. It's so remarkable. This little rook move actually brings the whole situation of building the bridge one rank further down, which essentially makes the idea doable. Because initially, when we had the rook here, we can't swing across to e7 to cover the gap between the pawn and the black rook, right? But when we play out this whole idea of going to here, then check, then here, then check, or rather across, and then we play rook g6, we actually manage to sneak one rank further up with the rook. And the idea is now that if they check, we start going back. They check, we go back. They go here, we go here. And now if they check, we have got the bridge built again. Fascinating stuff. And essentially, black is in Zugzwang. Because, again, I can't really move the king. Because rook e6 is just all over. In fact, rook e6 is a threat. And if rook check, then rook f6. And so this insanely subtle maneuver of zigzagging the king all the way down to e5 and then just making one tiny rook move actually would have made the win, I believe, possible. I'm not, resting my case that this is 100% win because I don't want to contradict Magnus yet. And by the way, the engine, he wants to go rook b5, which I haven't had a chance to analyze yet, but I don't think it makes a difference because now once I bought for g7, it shouldn't matter where the rook comes in. In the end, I will either build a bridge or keep the king cut off. For example, rook b8, king here is the engine move. So are we one move too late to the party? I don't think so, but I wanted to model this to you as well about how to win this. And the idea is to just come close, close, close. And when h2 happens, when you would think that this is going to be a stalemate, the king comes closer. And it allows the king to come out from the corner. And then you go check. Not the discovery. And now if the king goes this way, we take the pawn. And if the king goes back to the corner, then we can just go around, check the king out of the corner and take the pawn. Easy peasy. And that's a win. So my last word on this meta is that right now I'm convinced that this endgame in fact was winnable. But under the time pressure and perhaps, yeah, Magnus was quite amazed by the extreme accuracy of Wei's defense. He thought that this was a draw, which is what happened in the game. So one more time, I will show you how it ended. So myriads of checks were given. In the end, Magnus decided to block the check, promote, and now the black king is out of the cage. And now it's going to nurse the pawn all the way to the end. And that was the end of that super fascinating game. And this is also why, by the way, sometimes a drawn game is far more exciting to analyze and watch and go through than a decisive one where, you know, one side may actually outclass the other. So that's for today, guys. We have got tonight, or rather tomorrow morning in my case, the last day of the preliminaries, which will decide the top 8 players who will then go into, to the knockout stage. Don't forget to like, to sub, to comment, because that helps me and the algorithm, and I'm going to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.